I'm going to talk about, Vance asked me to talk about the UIL eligibility chart, um, just because there's been some confusion in the past years about when kids can lose eligibility and regain eligibility and what that looks like. Um, we have to follow the UIL sanctions and the UIL rules, okay, that govern the eligibility. Now, for sports, for athletics, that's everything that we do. We don't go to any type of other events that are not UIL. So, therefore, all of our practices and all of our games are under the UIL, or excuse me, under UIL, which means that we have to follow this eligibility chart. For the fine arts, I know that they do both, and I believe Miss Montoya and Mr. Rasapontong are coming up with requirements for those non UIL events that they do, and they'll be communicating those to you at a later time. All right, the first thing that we need to go over is the fact that most of the state is still on a 6 weeks grading period. However, Grand Prairie is on a 9 weeks. That's very important for the beginning of the year because our very first UIL eligibility check is at the 6 weeks mark. You can see here on September 30th. Okay, what that means is that whatever grades or whatever you've accepted from the kid on Friday at 4:15 when the school bell rings, that's all you can put in the grade book. Okay, you cannot put anything. We cannot look at anything that the kid turns in the next week. All right, we pull grades that Monday morning, and whoever has a failing grade becomes ineligible. Okay, now as you can see, they lose. They actually technically we check the grades on the 30th. However, they have a week grace period. So during that week, they are still allowed to practice and they are still allowed to play in any UIL games if the coach deems so. They do not technically lose their eligibility until the next week. I know that was confusing for some of us that went to school events and saw kids participating, knowing that they had failed at the 6 weeks mark, but they were still participating during this grace period week. Okay, so they have a whole week where they're still allowed to participate, and then this Friday, when the school bell rings, they're no longer eligible. All kids, again, can regain. So if they lose it here, they can regain their eligibility here, or they could lose their eligibility here. So we have a very quick turnaround between the 6 week mark and the 9 week mark. That's why it's very, very important for grades to stay updated so that we can keep on our kids. All coaches have the access to all of our athletes. Anybody that's participating in a sport, we have access to their grades. And I have charged my coaches with making sure that they're checking grades weekly. Okay, it's very hard to explain to a parent a kid that's been passing for 5 weeks and then at the 6 weeks mark they have now entered all their grades and now they failed for the 6 weeks. Okay, so again, we have the first check on the 30th. If they fail, then they'll lose it on the 7th, technically. They can regain back their eligibility when the 9 weeks ends if they are passing everything, not just your class. They have to pass every single thing on their schedule. They can also lose it here again. All right, again, it's the same thing. They have a week-long grace period in between when we pull grades and when they actually lose their eligibility. So again, during this whole week time, they are allowed to participate. Okay, from there, the kids have a very long time where they, because we're on a 9 week schedule, they get to participate. If they did not fail here at the 9 weeks mark, then they have until the next 9 weeks, okay, the next 9 weeks for us to check to see if they failed. Okay, again, that was a point of confusion last year and a point of contention where a lot of us were confused as to why kids who are failing most of the 9 weeks are still participating. Again, because of our grading periods in Grand Prairie ISD, if they passed the first 9 weeks, then it does not matter if they're failing the entire second 9 weeks. It only matters what grades they get at the second 9 weeks, whether they lose eligibility. Okay, now it is up to us coaches. We can give consequences for kids who are not passing or are not doing what they're supposed to. But again, that comes into the communication between um, all of us and making sure that our grades are updated. If they do fail here, they fail at the 9 weeks, then their first check is 3 weeks later, right here. If they are passing 3 weeks later, again, they have that 1 week of grace period where they still cannot participate, and then they will regain their eligibility here. So again, if they've passed here, they have all of the second 9 weeks to do, technically, whatever they want to on their grades, as long as they pass again at the second 9 weeks. If they failed, then they have a chance at every 3 week mark to regain their eligibility. So if they fail here, they lose their eligibility here. At this time, if they are passing every single class, then on this day they regain their eligibility and they're good for the rest of the 9 weeks. However, if they failed here, we come to check here, they're still not passing, then we have to wait and check them again here. If they're passing here, then they'll regain their eligibility here and they're good for the rest of the 9 weeks. If they're still failing, they're still out. Okay? So again, for those kids that pass this right here, they have a whole 9 weeks grace period. For those kids that failed right here, they have the ability every 3 weeks to gain their eligibility back. Again, it all comes down to making sure our grades are updated and making sure that we are communicating with each other on who is doing what they're supposed to and who is not doing what they're supposed to. If you have any questions, you can see me or you can see Mr. Rasapantam.